All right, so hi and welcome to this live stream. I'm really happy to be able to do such a live streaming again. It has been a few days and weeks, I guess. Yeah, weeks. I hope you all are doing fine, and I hope you enjoy these type of live coding formats. So again, as always, feel free to ask any questions while watching this. Please use the chat. I already said hello. You can say hi from where you're watching. That's always interesting. And yeah, so if you have anything that's related to Java, related to testing, today I want to do a little bit of enterprise testing and Selenium UI testing. And yeah, then just put it into the chat. So this is supposed to be a super relaxed afternoon here in Europe coding session. So get some caffeinated drink or some, well, depends on the time of the day, some other drink. And yeah, let's have some fun here. Latvia there, that's cool. Hi. Yeah, so what I want to show you actually, we can do many things, but today I want to use one application. Where is my OBS? There we go. This one that is called Day Captain. You probably have seen me talking about that on my YouTube channel, which is a time and task management application. And for that, the system tests actually are open source. So that's an application I developed with a friend of mine. And actually on GitHub, you'll find some system tests, so these are the actual system tests, almost all of them, for backend tests and UI tests, which I like to spend some time on. So recently I did quite a lot on Selenium and especially Selenide. I created a video on that actually as well. There it is. You'll find that on my blog. Why I found that really interesting to use Selenide instead of Selenium. Although it depends a little bit how you shape your system tests and your like test code and all of this, but that's also now what I did for a bunch of projects and also this one. So that's actually a system test project that uses this application in such a way that we can just, well, do some tests. So in case you have some questions, just put this into the chat. So I'm trying to monitor the chat. Morocco, hi, that's cool. What OS you use? I use Arch Linux. Wait a second, I have an answer for that as well. There we go. Why I'm using Linux. So you can go to my blog and check this out. Why this looks that weird. Why I use Linux, and that's Arch Linux with the i3 window management. That's probably the most often question I got. So which Linux I'm using. If you have free time, can you please make videos on Spring Data MongoDB? Well, kind of. I don't use Spring that much. Actually, some people don't even know I did a lot of Spring in the past, but now I mostly use Enterprise Java, Quarkus, things like that. And that's certainly not my main expertise. But if you look at the Spring folks, there's a lot of content out there, and I'm pretty sure folks can help you with MongoDB and Spring Data. Selenide, yay. Why not macOS? I like Linux. It just does what I tell it to. I actually talk a little bit about this in that video. One benefit is I actually like the Linux kernel, specifically for Docker. So I do sometimes some Docker magic that runs directly on my host without some simulation. So that's really nice. But most reason actually because I got so used to Linux, and that's the system why I'm most productive on. So I claim these days it shouldn't matter that much, what you use as long as you're productive with that. All right, so actually what I want to code a little bit, so it's not just, I didn't prepare anything. So, if you see something failing, that's the point of these live coding sessions. That's actually what happens in real life as well, because this is real life. So what I actually wanted to do is to show some, make me smaller, to show some system tests that are, well, the actual system tests. And as often, this is how a lot of projects and tests look like. Of course, mine as well. So, sometimes you disable some tests and comment them out just because, well, it doesn't work yet and all that stuff. So I just want to use this session to make them a little bit more complete. And then, of course, if you have any question regarding the testing, so this is already a little bit, more of a complex setup. then feel free to do so. So what these are UI tests. I will show you in a second what this does, and that's really cool. I'm a big fan of this Selenium. Just in general, the mechanism. So for example, this one, what that does, it goes to, for example, that is this task management application. And the cool thing about it, you can use it only by keyboard. Well, not only you could, but you can use it only by keyboard if you want to. So for example, I can say, hello world, and create some, for example, some tasks, and like make them done and finished or not, and go back and forth. And that's already, I found this quite interesting for Selenite, because of course it works, so you can script and add some keyboard as well, but it's a little bit different than like clicking somewhere. So that's quite cool. So for example, what this does here, that's a test that creates a day task with some note, with some like extra thing. And I just love to watch this. So that's the real-time speed, and you see done, right? So it just opens the website and it just presses all these keys and does all that stuff just way faster than we could do it. So that's what I love about UI tests, seriously. Even if I watched it 100 times already, it still kind of amazes me. And what this, for example, does, I showed this in my videos, that I like to construct my tests in such a way that I have like reusable components and abstraction layers that I can talk to. So for example, when that's a test that creates such a task, such a day task, which means, well, if this would be the API, so there's also a test for that. That means, do an HTTP call for, I don't know, HTTP post with some JSON. But this one says, well, actually go to the site and then, like press some keys. So for example, 1 second, let's make this a little bit more smarter. Okay, monitor, no, yes. So then you see actually what I'm pressing here. So for example, here I say, well, go to this page and then, like select this task list. You see this, press N twice for, hello world or goodbye world. And then maybe press escape, and you see there are some keyboard hints that you can press to just select all that stuff. So in this application, everything is actually usable by the keyboard, which I just love as a programmer. Well, of course, I'm biased, I created it. But, all these things, what I just did, goodbye world here as the task name or title. And here's some extra notes, some extra description with the single quote. So this means, you press a key, then that is selected, and then you insert this hello world, right? And then you can press escape and enter to add it. So basically that should be now simulated, right? So that is now the use case that I want to test. Basically, as a user, I want to, like create this task for that specific day, June 8th, right? So I go there, and what does that mean? Well, I have to press all these keys. Of course, I could also click here and click there, but well, keyboard is cooler, right? So that's the test that uses the keyboard. And what this does in Selenite is actually that, well, I created already a bunch of actions and classes for this. So that's already, like kind of sophisticated here. So what it does, create action, like this is already using some abstraction here. For example, set the name to a specific name. That means, well, go to this overlay, delete the old title first, and press I for selecting this. Well, I can open it up here. So first, new, basically, then press I for select this one here, and then, press, for example, hello world, right? Like the title. So in this press, that uses just these actions provided by Selenite. So that's the Selenite, actions and keys. And the reason for that is, sometimes you want to press it with some shift and some control. So I had some methods for that already, just because it does some more complex stuff. This would not be necessary. And then, you can do this. So what I like to do, and that is always, if you watch my videos, I like to abstract these things into nicely readable methods, right? So all these cryptical keys, for example, here for setting this area and this extra description, is then, the lower level details is just abstracted into, well, what needs to be done here. But the test can just say, yeah, set the name, set the note, okay, create, right? And that simulates that the user goes there, presses this key, types in that, presses that key, enter, and then it's there, right? So then hopefully this will be created here, and you saw that this test is already green, or was green before, so we can do this again. So it just quickly reloads the page, goes to this day view that's called, goes there, creates it, and well, actually goes through the list, checks that the first name is equal new item. Okay, I don't know if that's actually the case here. Let's see which, it goes to a specific day, which is 16th of January. Don't ask me why. And yeah, there it is. And then you see that here it has such a description. We can open it and see, okay, that this is equal to what I actually created in that test, according to this one. All right, so it seems to work. And of course, also the assertions were green here. So that's basically the idea that we want to do. Okay, let's have a look at the chat. I always try to remember that, to just have a chat with you folks. Docker on Windows is a pain. Yes, I agree. Day Captain is open source, not the program, the system test, and some other, where is it? Some other tools. So here, everything that's basically in this GitHub org. The system test there, and well, there's an API description, which is just, well, first draft, work in progress, basically. But everything in the program is doable via an API. So if you have an account, that, well, the idea is that this will be properly documented, so everything is usable as a user here properly. And that's also a first draft of some tooling, for example, a command line tool to quickly add something. We could also actually one day do a live coding about that, to do a little bit of, like shell script hacking. So this basically, there's something like that, where, you can just use this API. So that's kind of interesting. Search GitHub, yes. Web accessibility regarding what? I didn't quite get that comment. All right, so that's basically the idea. But what I want to do now, as you saw, so this was just an explanation, I actually have some missing tests, and that is a test that is quite interesting. So this already goes a little bit into the use cases there, what this program allows us. So basically these tasks, and that is an idea of using this program, means that you have task lists that are specific for a day. That is just a psychological reason for that, so that we're not overwhelmed, like by reading these 100 things that we have to do in one specific day, but it's limited. So tomorrow I only have, like 5 items and not 100. But there's also a backlog functionality, where it's, like a sprint cycle backlog with some test data here in my test system, where we can have something like, folders or backlogs, and then just having, for example, an inbox, and then adding some, it's kind of like a task that doesn't have a due date yet. So like something that we want to do at some point, and then we can also assign this actually to work on this for a day. So for example, implement important feature. Then I could go there and say, well, actually I want to work on this next week or something like that. Or I want to work on that tomorrow. So in case we have set these tasks in that inbox, for example, and there's actually, so that's what this tooling is for. It actually adds something to your inbox. Says it somewhere here. Yep, to your inbox. So if you call this script, then it will just add it there, which is kind of practical. So I think I talked about this before. So I could add some task from anywhere in my system, which is just super helpful. And then I could for example, move this to a different backlog there, and assign it to a day and things like that. So you can check out these keyboards. If you have some questions on this application, just please feel free to ask. And now what I want to do, there is actually a test for it to first create such an inbox item and then assign like a day, I think that's a day task, no, a week task here from it. So assign a week task from this backlog item, which just means, well, I want to test creating such a thing and then assigning it to next week, for example. So just to see if that works. Let's see if the test works. So it just goes there, says, well, yeah, now I tampered with the test data. Sorry, dear test. That was not the reason. I actually shouldn't tamper with the test data while I run my system tests, right? So it uses this, assigns it. Well, it's a little bit too fast to see it. So basically what it does, it goes to this backlog, creates this new backlog item, and then assigns it into a week, and it has such a connection. So that's another principle, that all of these items can be connected like in a graph. So that's quite interesting. So we can say, well, like please work on that next week. And the reason why this is connected, if for example we color it in some in some area here, then this is also colored because they inherit. So for example, I could say, well, on this day, on Tuesday, I want to work on this now finally, and I want to work on it on a specific time. So then you see it also has a specific color, and it calculates, like the time that you spend on it, and things like that. So that's the reason why we have these connections. And you see and check these connections here. So that's the criteria. Okay, now we want to test that. How can I test it? Basically I go to that view and then press the corresponding keys and see if that is, like if the information is correct here. So for example here, now I also have to read it. Go to this backlogs, please create. You see here with these method names, it's kind of readable, right? So that's always important for me to have these tests that are, like somewhat readable. And say, okay, create it, and now assert it that the last one here is equal to this new backlog item. Okay, and now assign this method. Week task from backlog item, so go there to some specific week and just assign it there for the last thing in the list. And what this then does, just goes there, selects it, and says, well, okay, NT, new task in this case, and then it will just, like be selected in some way. So we could set a name. So the name will be selected in this action view, and then some week, and then press enter, and then it will be there. This is also interesting. Wait for loading. That is, when you know Selenide, a little bit counterintuitive, because Selenide says that usually you should have these. You should not write waits, but just like say, okay, I expect some condition, and Selenide implicitly waits. But in this case, actually, because of these key pressing, and when you know whether something is ready, I included some waits, which just like goes to some spinner. Maybe you saw it when you reload something here. We have like a, oh, you don't see it because I'm blocking the view. 1 second. We have some like spinner, this captain's hat, and then if you change something, then it just quickly spins. So that's, well, I thought funny. But that's basically the indicator whether something is loading. So in this case, it goes to that element and says, well, does it have a CSS class? Well, if not yet, it might not be yet loading. So that is a little bit of implicit logic, but then it just waits up until 8 seconds until it's not loading anymore. And that means that I then can continue. So that's a little bit, well, contains a little bit of this implicit logic. And then what it does, it goes to this edit view. So it just edits the field and sees if it has the connection to this, relation to this week task. So let's go back here. That's basically doing this. So you see that this has an icon, and if we hit E for edit, then we see this view again. And here we want to be sure that that is the case here. And you saw in my test, I also have this as a descriptive method name. So I say something like, get relation names. So this method, first of all, waits until this action view is being loaded, because that's asynchronous as well. And then it sees, well, does it have the correct task? So if that is the case, then I know that the connection is set. So I always find this interesting for UI tests, because sometimes you have to kind of like think around the corner. if you say, if a condition is being met, how do I, as a user or as a human, see that the condition is correct, right? So in this case, I see, well, does it display something here, or sometimes does it have an icon? And then in my test code, I try to create an abstraction for it, sometimes like a Boolean value or a string value to match. Does this match the expected condition, right? So that is then helpful. And then I switch to the other view, which of course is also doable by keyboard shortcuts. So it says, well, switch this view by going to, well, GW for go to weak view. Just the following, that I just jump here, and then it wants to see that now this task, well, exists and is being assigned. So if I edit this, then that's now the counter, the bidirectional relation, that now this points to this backlog item in the inbox. So let me delete that again, otherwise it will fail my test probably. And then I can run this again for that assign weak tasks. All right, and then we can finally go to implement some other ones. Using tab index alongside other techniques in web pages enters in a field called web accessibility. So yes, I use a tab index as well, but for accessibility for this particular application, I mean, you're right, you have to see how much that is accessible, because it's actually, its main focus is to be used with the keyboard and, you know, like by seeing that view. So it won't be fully accessible for people who have issues with the eyes, or, you know, who can't see well or whatever, when you have to read something, because that's not quite that scope or something like that. But other than that, you could, I think sometimes we even prohibit hitting tab just to not, you know, confuse too much, because you should use other keys for selecting. But yeah, tab index is just an indicator whether something can be selected. So for example, if I go here, and all of these things that can be selected here are actually these tab index fields. So they set a tab index. Yeah, you're right. It's too fast to see isn't the problem. Yeah, you're right. I agree. That's the cool thing about UI test, isn't it? That it's super fast and that actually we don't have to wait much. All right, but anyway, I think this code I can actually delete. But now I would like to go to implement these missing tests finally. So we did something productive today. So let's see. Assign existing task from backlog item. Yes, so with these connections, you can actually also set them up later. So in case I have something like my hello task, and yeah, I don't need this, and hello world task here, I can now, they're of course not connected. So I have one inbox item that just says hello, and I have a task in this week that is called world. So they can, now they're not connected, but I can connect them. If I set up the relation here, I can search for some other items like my hello, and then I can go and connect this later on. So, you know, kind of like going to a graph and then drawing a line between these two elements, that also works. And that is the same, that is this test here, what that should do, because I can do that later on, that I don't do it immediately, but basically at first I say, now that's the wrong UI, API, create, go to backlogs. Now I have to see, you know, the best programming is copy paste programming, like here. Go to the backlogs view, then create an inbox item that is called new backlog item. Yes, assign that this exists. Okay, and now instead of assigning a weak task, I go to the weak view and create a weak task, and then I want to assign that afterwards. So let's try this out. And again, if anything fails, please don't judge. That's all live. That's all live coding. I go to the weak view. I say go to the weak tasks. Yes, and then I can say weak task create. I think I'm actually yes. Actually don't know, just like you, I have to look into what's available here. Yes, I go to this, let's close all these fields. I go to this task list, which basically means I go to my weak view, I select this task list, and now I'm here. And now in this view, I can say, well, please create a new task like I did before. So in this case, the hint it shows you, press N twice to just add a new task. Something like this. And with that programmatic fashion, I can create, which is not the create, it's just the action yet. And then I can say action set a name to, how do we call it? New week task, just like before. New week task. And just save, we don't need anything else. Okay, and then please make sure that once you load this, it contains new week task. It says here contains exactly, so I will just delete all the other ones. Usually I try to write my tests in such a way that it doesn't fail if something else was pre-existing before, so that, you know, it's idempotent. But also I can do this here because as part of my test, to make that just a little bit easier, because that's all test data, it afterwards goes to that week and deletes everything. So then this works again. It says save, okay. And now if I go to this, I actually have to see if there's already a method for that. And if not, we have to assign. No, there's not. So what we can do, and there's actually, that's a new functionality now. If I go to this week task that doesn't exist yet, hello, select it and then press, we see it in the keyboard help. If I press F, then I can connect it to something else. So in this case, I press F and then it, well, does something else here. So if I, for example, insert hello, then I want to see that I actually can connect it. So I could select, well, multiple ones, plan, and then, you know, it's all selectable by the keyboard. And then I need to type that and then press enter, right? So I find this interesting, this technique. That's why I chose this topic for today, because that's already, you know, a little bit more sophisticated UI tests. So now we have to see where are we focused right now, which keys to press, and so on and so forth. So when we create a task, let's see, I assert that now this task is existent, yes. Then I go to week task, well, I'm there already, week task, and say instead of create, I say something like, should I call it assign or connect? The other thing was also called assign, since it doesn't exist yet. I just call it connect to item and new backlog item. And in this case, it should already search for a term and, well, assume that this exists here. So I say connect to item name. I go there. I should, it should be focused here. So I can assume that this is now actually focused. I could say select something or just select this here. Yep, that's that, edit. And I can already create another method for some index. So in the case that, you know, it's not the first one, but I want to jump down first, so we have to consider all of this. And then if that is selected already, here it's select index and then press, that's this button F for combining that. And then let's see, this should be this, it's actually a new action. So we will create this in the same way. Let's see, added task action, that's the connect relation action or something like that, unless you have a better name. And that is not this one, but I think, no, not this one, action. All right, so when you open this up, wait for loading, should be visible, edit task. So this is, oh God, what's the name for it? Now we have to look up the name of the HTML element. Add relation. Okay, interesting. So because they're all, it uses custom components. So this should be visible. All the other ones have been copy and pasted. We can get rid of that. So wait for loading, that's fine. And then saying, action, yes. set name or some set search term, I would say, which means press, what's that? Well, nothing, just press the search term, so which means enter the search term. And then save should be existing anyway. Yeah, that's an enter, so that's already there, which means set the search term. Since this view, I don't know if you've seen it, that's already focused. So it says filter, and I can just insert something, and then if it matches, then immediately I don't have to click or something. I can just press enter for, you know, connect. Okay, so let's see. I have, just like you, no clue if this works. So connect to item. Let's go for new, what's that? Connect relation action. Yes. And then it says set search term name. Then we pray and hope that this is existing and say save, and that should be it. And the save should also, yes, wait for the reload, and then we see whether all of that works. Okay, I have no clue if that works. Connect to item, hello, yes. So that should connect it. So then we can see that this actually exists. And then afterwards, if there is a, that's a before, that's good. So it's not a tear down, so afterwards the item still exists, which means I can just run this and see and hope whether everything works. Okay. So you can assess for yourself, do you think that this works? I don't know. That's always the fun, especially when doing a live coding. All right, so it said failed. Okay, it said hello. Yes, because I told you before, and I still did it. Where's my weak? Oh, there it is. Okay. I had to delete these things that are still existing here. Let's try it again. So it goes here, it creates a backlog item. Yes, it creates this one. Nothing happens. Oh, this is not selected. Interesting. So you see what happens now after 8 seconds. 8, yes. It now fails. Why? Because it had this implicit wait, or actually explicit wait in this case, where I call this connect init should be visible, and it didn't load actually because it wasn't the focus wasn't on the first element, but instead, so let's change this. I say connect to item 0 for selecting the first one, because it's not selected yet. And with this it says, well, now that's even more keyboard magic. GG, it's like a Vim binding. It jumps to the top and then goes down, because, well, you have to know where to jump to, right? And that's a relative jump. So what it does, it jumps at the beginning and says, okay, 5 down or 6 down, or in this case 0 down. So just jump to the beginning. And if you do that, then it should work that in this case, if I'm selected somewhere else, for example, that I just jump to the first one. Well, now I only have one. We can copy it, so now I can jump around. So that's basically it. Okay, let's try again. Let's see if that works. So these are the funny things, especially if you have a test that then does nothing, that's already a bad sign. And then typically, depending on the timeout of Selenite, just after a while it, yeah. No, it was, I saw it was correct. After a while it just fails. All right, looking at the chat, hello from Turkey. Awesome, hello Turkey. Productivity total for today added hello world, hello world, hello world. Yes, that's the day's hello. That's today's task. A very productive day, isn't it? And where are we? Here we. Just curious, how does this test going to run in CI, or is it gonna be disabled? No, don't disable tests. You probably saw this before. I did disable test. No, UI tests can run in the UI in CI as headless. So there's a way to run. There's a browser driver. Let me check. Chip. Somewhere here. I use the Chrome driver, and there's also a headless version for that. So you can actually just start this headless, then you don't even see something. So here in my test, when I start it up, right, you see the browser flickering, but you can do it even in a headless way without it, because, well, now it's actually only the computer talking to each other, right? So they don't need me seeing something, so it doesn't need to be displayed, and it does work in CI. That's a good question, and it's actually very important. So very good question. And now we saw that the test is green. That is good, but also we didn't assert anything, so it just means it didn't fail. But if it is now still existing, let's see. Well, it didn't have the connection, so maybe there was something else wrong. Connect to item, it should... Oh, you see what happens? Of course. Nobody complained in the chat. I forgot to call most of the important code, so that's it. Why didn't it work? Well, because I didn't actually call the specific action. So, that's also for you. Maybe the signal to get some more caffeine. Did it now work? I saw that it, maybe you've seen that as well. I saw that it typed something, new backlog item, but it didn't. New backlog item. New, no, oh, that's the wrong one. New backlog item. Did I have another typo? It didn't find it. Backlog, new backlog item, right? Yes. Should I copy and paste that name? That's weird. Okay, so if we can do this slowly, what I sometimes do in this case. So maybe you've seen the issue. It opened the correct, well, I can run it again. It opened the correct action view, and I saw that it typed something very quickly, but it didn't connect it correctly, and I think the result was empty for some reason. So let's see. Yeah, there was nothing there. So then it just presses enter, but nothing happens. In order to debug this now, what I would do, just set a breakpoint, because these tests are executed by IntelliJ, and of course we can just say, well, actually go and debug something. By the way, we can also do a debug on the server, so it starts a debug port that runs Quarkus, by the way. So Quarkus in the dev mode also runs a debug port, but in this case actually we want to debug the browser, the UI test, and now I hope that it, yes, sets the breakpoint and it captures it. So let's see. Okay, nothing happens here, still empty, and now if I do one forward, set search term, now new backlog item. I think I know what happens. If I now do it, it probably works. Okay, no it doesn't. Oh wait. Yes, now it worked. Why? And that's probably the most trickiest thing with setting UI tests. It had some delay. Why? Because this view is also an asynchronously loading. Maybe you see it here in the when I do something, yeah, I press F to connect, and then I say hello world, contact, and you see it loads something here. So that's asynchronous, so it's too fast. Because I say, please search for it, enter, and before it even has a chance to display the result, it goes and closes it. So what it needs to do, and you know, the obvious response to something like that is always to say, well, just wait for 1 second. But no, that's not a good idea, because I wanted to declaratively wait until something is the case. So usually in Selenite, I just say assert that something is the case, and I wait, you know, like for 8 seconds or whatever the timeout is. But in this case, I say explicitly wait, for example, like here for loading. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, also the correct thing here. Add relation should be, no, it's not, sorry. Wait for loading, this one, and there's something else missing, and I now actually have to debug my HTML, because it has a loading thing here that we don't see. Okay, so 1 second. You see? Oh, div class loading, yeah. Probably you don't see it, but basically, if there is if an element within that one, so that's now the Selenite syntax, which I'm now really a fan of. Loading should not exist. So I said that in a video. I really like that way of writing these methods, the API of Selenide. There is a method should be, should have, should, and all of them do the same. It's basically just for readability. Because if I say should not be exist is not a good English, right? It says should not exist or should not be visible. So, you know, there are a few alias method names that I think is kind of cool. So that now I say should not exist. Exist is a condition of Selenide here, built-in one. And if I say, okay, now please wait until that thing is loading, or wait until loading is finished. And now I hope this actually works, because now it enters the search term, then it waits for the loading, waits until the spinner is gone, and then it presses enter. And then if everything is correct, we see that it works. Yes, you saw? Well, probably not. So it typed it very fast, and then it took like half a second until it finished loading or less. And then it pressed enter. But instead of me smart assing and explaining this, I actually should have had an assert. So basically I should say, well, connect to it, that saves it, so it reloads, and then assert that this weak task, that the last task, the currently, I think the name is focused task, dot has something, has relation. So has relation is a Boolean, and that shows us whether this one has this arrow. So that means that it's related to something. Here in this view, it doesn't tell us what. So again, that's the difference between using a backend API and just all the information that you see as a human. So we see, okay, it has a name and some, you know, like relation, some connection to something else. But then if I open it, I could look it up which connection. But we do this later. First of all, I just want to assert that it has the relation is true. And now just let me roll back just to see that I actually didn't tell you something wrong. What I sometimes do when I run my test and the test is only green, I don't trust tests that are only green, because that means either I'm super smart or my test sucks and it didn't test enough. So now I want to, you see, that was the purpose. Now it's red. I removed my fix again, and now I'm just made sure that the assert is correct. And now I insert this again. Sometimes I do this approach when I write my test afterwards, that I deliberately make it fail. So just to be safe, because I don't trust myself, especially at that time of the day. And yes, now it's green. Very nice. So this works already. And then we can actually go into this edit detailed view to see if that is also the correct version. I was gonna say wait 1000. Yes, you're right, but nice. Sir, I have a bit awkward question. Could you share your thoughts on Python versus Java versus C++? Which language will you think dominate the next 10 years? I will do this at the end of the stream if you don't mind. It's a very generic question. Should work is how I approach everything. Is it Spring? No, that's Quarkus. Or actually, what you see here is not Spring at all, that's Java, so that's plain JUnit at test. And that uses, well, here a lot of classes that I wrote, but basically it, let's go into this one, it uses Selenide. So Selenide, which is an abstraction on top of Selenium, to have UI tests. The application that you see, that's a Quarkus application. So it uses Quarkus and, you know, HTML, JS. But what we have right now is only Selenide, so it's basically the Java driver. But here, that's a good question, is actually it doesn't matter, because I just use a UI test, so I could use, you know, any technology. But I'm a Java developer, so I use Java. Okay, so we almost finished that test method. Now it's already green, that's good, but it doesn't tell us whether it's connected to the correct thing, right? It could be connected to anything. So similar to what we had before, I can actually go and copy and paste this, because I can. We go and edit this task. So basically say press E to edit, and then once this is reloaded, hello, I think I changed something, so it needs reloading. 1 second. Yes. Once that is reloaded, it actually shows us the correct connection, so that it's not just connected to something, but to the backlog item that I just created. So basically I want to edit this one, the last task, and I just saw this today. I want to create another method because I have a lot of occurrences like edit and then always like size -1, so I can have a convenience method edit last, and that should automatically jump to the last one. And select index goes to, yep, so there's an easier way. It says press, wait a second, it should be press Shift E, I think. Sorry, G. Shift press G. Why G? Because that's the Vim binding of these views, so I can use GG to jump to the top and Shift G to jump to the bottom. And that's of course faster than, you know, pressing it 10 times. Well, it's fast enough anyway, but and that's basically it. So I could go there and select it here, and now, yeah, there we go. And you see this probably often, that you should go and always spend some time refactoring your tests as well, right? Because now I say, well, edit, and you see many times, okay, list size -1, that's not the best way to do this. I should refactor this to edit last, and let's go for the occurrences here again, so I can just quickly, yeah, go and change all of these occurrences, where I now have another method for more syntactical sugar. Oops, that was incorrect, but I will just, there's a nice key, F2, that jumps to the next error in IntelliJ. So IntelliJ for the win. Edit last, let's jump to the other occurrences. So basically what I'm doing, I have a lot of occurrences here where I just do this. So now you have to watch me in the super interesting task of refactoring my test code. But you see that this is very important. So as I mentioned a few times in my videos, you should always use that time and invest something into refactoring your test code as well. Test code quality is important. It's not just nice to have. Okay, so we now got rid of all of the other methods, and this one is this edit last method that I'm using here now. So where's my test? Where was my test before? Here we are. Okay. That is still not correct. I just have to correct it. Edit last, yes, it goes to that. It says relation name size1, yes, contains new backlog item, and it should be in the inbox, and then close it. Okay, let's run this again. So now it does the same thing as before, creates the backlog item, creates the weak task, connects them, checks that it has some relation, and goes into the detail page and checks the relation of so the actual relation of the task. Yep, there we go. Let's run this again. Yeah, that is in slow motion. So it has this name and also this additional name of the inbox, where in which backlog it is. And congratulations, our test is now green and successful. Awesome. So that was, I think that was the only disabled test. Oh no, more stuff to do. I'm sorry. The stream will continue for a while. Do you have some questions for now? I don't know if I'm personally a big fan of writing tests and just of the test topic. That's a really important one, but I know that's probably not the most fun thing to watch, or hopefully maybe you learn something. I'm often using Angular as my front-end framework. What disadvantages do you see in SPA approaches, for example, a Qt template approach? That's a very good question. Are you using a JS framework for UI? Yes, no, I'm not. So what I'm using for JS, I can actually show this. So that's the front-end project. That's actually not open source, but because you are my dear followers, I'll show you something like that. And actually, well, it's a front end, so it's, in theory, it would be accessible. This code is actually not accessible like that because it's minimized or minified. So it goes through a processor. And what I'm doing, I'm using this module approach. So it has, well, it's almost like Java programming. It has some classes, and all of these classes are custom elements. There's a nice workshops by Adam Bean, who does some front end stuff and explains stuff about custom components, web components, and this is really helpful. So for example, if I go for my day tasks, you see that this is actually, and that's JavaScript. It's a JavaScript class where it, does some stuff with templating. So the only thing I'm doing is lit HTML and custom web components, so custom elements here, and that's it. And the rest is just like JS code quality by like using classes, trying to use object-oriented patterns, and all of the rest is really just I would say should be kind of straightforward. So once you have some templating approach, the reason why I actually have quite some JS code is because it uses a lot of keyboard navigation. So that's basically most of the code that you see here. It's a lot of, I have a class for recording some, the keys that you're pressing, and it's a lot of code like this. In case you press R, what happens? In case you press T, and so on and so forth. And then please focus this, focus that, trigger the action, things like this. And that's really helpful and convenient. And although this is kind of complex, I actually don't feel the necessity for another JS framework. So to your question, whether Angular would be used or for an SPA, it just really depends what you're doing. From my perspective, it's like you can go, these days you can go a lot just with plain JS. When I started doing front-end development like 10 to 15 years ago, it was different. Everybody used jQuery, and you needed, kind of like jQuery syntax to just get some stuff done. And now the syntax of a Selenide actually is very similar to this jQuery syntax that we had back then with the $. But nowadays with plain JS, ES6, you can write all of these selectors just, with plain JavaScript. You can do a lot with it. It's actually very powerful. So I don't necessarily see the necessity for it. And to your question about a Qt template, so in case you're wondering what is this Qt Quarkus, that is this templating approach of Quarkus that I'm actually using as well. So in case you guessed that, you guessed it correctly. So it's basically, where's a nice template here? It's a templating approach of using HTML plus some syntaxes, so the kind of handlebar syntax for inserting something which will be rendered on the server. So that server-side rendering, it's basically action-based MVC, and this approach is really, really nice because like you invoke some URL from the client side, the server processes it and sends you the HTML, and that's basically what I'm doing as well. So when I have, where is my other secret backend project? When I have, for example, this day view, which is like one HTML view, it has, it's just HTML with invoking some, style sheet and some JavaScript that has been processed before. And then sometimes I have something like, display the user or something like that. And that's just, a handful, and the rest is just stuff that is basically triggered by the JavaScript and then loaded afterwards. But that really depends if you want to include all the information at the server side rendering. So what I could do here is to say, well, display all the information already and render this into the HTML, but then you would have to, do some reloading. And since these views are very dynamic, it just made more sense to say something like a dynamic loading here. But in the same way, you don't have to use a framework like Angular. Like as you see here, I just, the HTTP XML, oh God, what's the name? Like this Ajax fetch API from JavaScript. MDN fetch. This one is also kind of powerful already with, why is this in German? Who wants to read docs in German? Okay. So this API, for example, it comes with a promise. It returns a promise. So it's, I think it's usable enough so that you don't need necessarily a JS framework anymore. So that's basically it. How do you deploy this front end? Another question with some magic. So basically what I do, it's called Snowpack. It is just, I use it just as a JS minimizer. So actually I'm kind of minimalistic with my dependencies in JavaScript, because I pretty much have zero. Well, besides some date management, it's what's the name? Date and time API in Java, and before it was Joda time in JavaScript. There's a JS version, and since we do a lot of stuff with times here, for example, with displaying the times for these timelines, it made sense to include that. But then how I built the framework, the JS front end, is actually by just invoking a script. So the script says, please build all these JS files and then copy it into the other project, and then the other one gets rebuilt. So it's very custom, but very, very straightforward. So I have a JS file that's a little bit, let's say, well, along many lines of code, and that just gets minimized. So it's like this gibberish that will be created, something like, let's see how can we look into that? I think so. If I just go into, let's reload it into the JS file, and it looks something like, this, yeah, well, you actually see the templates here. That's the only thing that is kind of still seeable, but anything else is just literally, it's like one line of code, spaghetti code, where you cannot read like anything anymore. So it's like, that's the minimized version, and that's how it is created basically. All right. Thank you for your time. Well, thank you for your time of joining. So, yeah, we're already at one hour. So probably the least productive system test ever. 1 hour for one method. But no, I hope I could explain some stuff as well, and I hope it was interesting to watch these UI tests. If you're actually curious what this application does, feel free to try that out. Go to daycaptain.com. You can try that out for free. Actually, also we recently implemented, which I'm just, I'm a keyboard nerd. So we, even for this home page that just shows some, like feature pages and some, hello world kind of stuff, we implemented a keyboard switcher for, or keyboard listeners. So you can use this website and go through, all of these resources, watch some videos by just, pressing the keyboard, and see. That's me and my buddy, my friend, where we write this application together. So you can just go through all of these pages. We have some FAQs here that you can use by just the keyboard. I found that's kind of cool, but I'm a keyboard nerd. So you can try that out. I also have some videos if you want to go to my blog, where I explain, well, why such a task management application and some other stuff. So just go for that. Also recently, I think I mentioned this before in a live coding, I updated my blog to include some, like hashtags. So hashtag productivity, for example, with all of these entries, because I started writing my blog in, wait a second, I don't want to lie, in 2014. Wow. So that's the first entry that I have about Java 8. That was, I think, kind of new at that time. And there are many entries in this list of entries that I also don't have an overview over, which is why I now went through all of them and included like some hashtags there that I can just use even for myself. So yeah, you can check that out. Have a look at that. Please let me know. We're still trying to get some feedback on Twitter. I did a poll recently to just see how that goes. If you're interested, why even, like you can go and watch that video, why that might be interesting for developers. And yeah, if you have some other topics that you would like to see next time for a live coding, because I'm happy to, like just do whatever you would like to see. And then just let me know, put it into the chat, or later comment on the video or on Twitter, whatever. And yes, to your point, you actually remembered me of just 1 or 2 minutes with Java and C++ and all of this. If you do documentation, do you use something like Arc42 or the C4 model? Usually not. am aware of it and I like the idea, and I know, a lot of people and projects are happy with it. Depends a little bit on the complexity of the project. So with the projects I'm in, I like to have a little bit more pragmatic, and usually if you have a single location of stuff, whether it's a wiki or actually a bunch of ASCII files on GitHub, goes a long way already, because you can click it through and it's very, very pragmatic. I like to do that quite often. If So C4 model, from my experience, is a little bit more established, so I would probably go for that for documentation. So it's definitely, like a good one to especially document something that's a little bit more complex. So for that, you have to have like a fairly not challenging but fairly decent architecture, just that it makes sense. For anything less, I would just go with very pragmatic plain text files like ASCII doc, something like that. That's what I'm mostly doing. So now to the generic question: Python versus Java versus C++. So I don't see any well, for the next 10 years, what will dominate, I don't know, and I don't care, because what means dominate, right? For all three languages, I guarantee you there will be more than enough stuff to do. Actually, the amount of, or the number of developers and demand for the developers grows exponentially for a bunch of years now, which is crazy if you think about it. And software, as we know, is eating the world, and we will be in demand for all kinds of stuff. Especially if you think about it, all of these languages are very high in demand right now, which means we're creating so much legacy. So even if one language would, if there would stop being new projects being created starting from tomorrow, there are so many projects that, until all of us retire, we have more than enough stuff to do. So actually, I never regard these questions a lot, like what will dominate, what is number one, what is dying, quote unquote, like Java is dying for 25 years now. It's like, more than enough stuff to do. In general, I tend to like languages that have a very vibrant community and ecosystem like Java does. Why? Because if you want to create anything, there's probably already a library or some stuff or some tool for it, right? As it is for the other languages, or of what you mentioned. So all of them are, fine. I like typed languages that are compiled, like type safety, although we now talked a lot about JavaScript, but all of this. And for that, don't worry about it. If you know any of these languages, you'll be fine, right? So that's my opinion on that. Next topic, let's CI/CD. Okay, maybe let's do something about that. Let's see. All right. Other than that, I hope this was interesting to watch. And thanks a lot for joining. I really enjoy these. Also, these very pragmatic and relaxed type of evening coding sessions, especially when stuff fails. That's always fun to watch. And go check out that material and let me know what you think. And so long. Thanks a lot for watching, and enjoy your evening or day. Bye.